Hello, everyone. Eric Hörst here with Training Café. It's Monday, it's noontime. Grab your cup of coffee or your favorite beverage and let's sip together. Communing with coffee, talking about training and climbing. What could be better? That's what Training Café is all about. And that's why hopefully you're joining me every other Monday for these training cafes. Before we get to today's topic and then some of your questions, first of all, the shout out, the Training Cafe shout out. And this time it goes to a bunch of people. The website 8a.nu, it's a European climbing website, real big site. It's, does a lot of excellent news reporting. And you can also log your ascents and such on 8A. They did a poll for Climber of the Year 2020, asking the viewers of the website, hundreds of thousands of climbers, to vote on the Climbers of the Year. So it's a little bit of a popularity contest, but of course it also is intended to kind of rank climbers based on their successes during the year 2020. And so the results were published last week. And in terms of sport climbing, route climbing, number one in the world rank, of course, was Alex Megos. Probably doesn't surprise you because he's a great climber, a great guy, and he did the first ascent of bibliography, the world's second 515D last year. And he's also on the German Olympic climbing team. So he's going to be contending for gold in Tokyo this summer. And the top female was Laura Rigora, and certainly very deserving because she's been crushing it as well. Now, in terms of the top American in the route climbing ranking, well, it's Jonathan Siegrist coming in at number 7. And so that's fantastic. J-Star, as he's known, I believe did 3 515As last year. And he's done many more than that in the last few years. So certainly, as far as Americans are concerned, he's without a doubt the top sport climber in the country right now. And so very deserving having that number 7 rank in the world. Now, when it comes to bouldering, the Americans dominated. So number 1 rank, Drew Ruana for the men and Alex Puccio for women. And again, this is a world ranking, or again, it's kind of a popularity contest because it's voted on by the viewers of the 8a.nu website. So Drew and Alex Puccio, number 1. Number 2 man, Daniel Woods. Number 2 woman, Brooke Rabatu. And then number 3, Matt Foltz and Natalie Grossman. And number 4, Jimmy Webb. So a cluster of Americans at the top of the bouldering list there for 2020 recognition. And I'm really proud because I named 3 PhysiVantage athletes, Jonathan Siegrist, Drew Ruana, and Matt Foltz are all PhysiVantage athletes. And they were using PhysiVantage products throughout the 2020 season, supporting their training and their climbing. So a little bit of evidence, though anecdotal, that PhysiVantage nutrition products do support climbing performance. And you knew that already, right? Okay, so let's get on to today's topic, which is about core training and how core strength and core training is even more important than you think it is. Now, all climbers, if they're serious about training, know that you need to train your core. But I think most climbers spend even more time thinking about and training, say, their grip strength. And hopefully, to be effective, your training is more comprehensive. You can't just hangboard train to become a better climber. It's one piece of the puzzle, but I mean, flexibility, mobility, is a factor. And of course, to stay uninjured, you need to train your antagonists, your rotator cuff muscles. And of course, strong grip isn't enough. You need to be able to pull, so there's a lot of, aspects, many facets to effective training for climbing. And core is absolutely one of them. But, it's something that I think some climbers, and to be honest, myself for many years, kind of paid a bit of lip service to, because, I could look in the mirror and see my abs, and you kind of, might think, well, my abs look strong. I have a strong core, but there's a lot more to core strength than just your abs. And again, that's one of the misconceptions I think a lot of people have, is they feel like, their abdominals are strong, and maybe they have low body fat, as many climbers do, and you can see their abdominals, and the conclusion is, my core is strong enough to climb hard. I need to keep hangboarding. I need to keep campus boarding. But again, there's a lot more to effective core strength in rock climbing than just being able to see your abs. And in fact, when you're on steep rock, I often make the case that it's actually the strength through your posterior chain, posterior strength, that is perhaps more important than the anterior core. Because getting stiff up underneath an overhanging wall, keeping your center of gravity drawn up near that overhanging wall, is as much a function of posterior chain strength as it is anterior core. And of course, there's the obliques. Really you have to think of the core as all of the muscles between your shoulders and your hips, all the way around. So you got your obliques, you got all your anterior core, your pecs, anything that can contribute to stiffness to the system. Think about, when you're climbing, you're gripping with your fingers and you're standing on your toes, and you need to connect those two. And so the stronger your suspension system between your fingers and toes, the more stiffness you can generate. And it's not just strength, how much force you can exert between your fingers and toes for a few seconds, as in doing a single move. But it's also strength endurance, because to climb one of these long, steep routes, you need to be able to repeatedly, your core is pulsing, contract, contract, contract with each movement. And some moves a lot harder than others. There's a lot of breath holding involved, with some of those, strongest movements, where you really need to bear down and get stiff. You hold your breath. And then of course you have to remember to release that and consume some oxygen to fuel sustained climbing. If you do those steep physical routes, you get out of breath. And that's a sign that you're going anaerobic, that you're tapping into that anaerobic reserve because of the high power requirements that are extending over 20, 30, 40 seconds, maybe even several minutes on a long sport route. So you're going very anaerobic, and then the breath holding, and of course the occlusion of blood flow when you're gripping hard, your muscles are starved of oxygen, at least intermittently. And so that forces you more anaerobic as well. So there's a lot going on there. I mean, I've often pointed out, Adam Ondra does all that screaming and deep breathing and these guttural sounds when he's on these steep routes. A lot of climbers scream and shout on hard, steep routes. And, part of that is it seems to help with the effort. But it also, I think in Ondra's case, there's so much of it that I think it helps him breathe. It helps, when you yell, you exhale air. And so it kind of breaks that breath holding. So it's like breath hold, hard move, yell as you move. And then breath hold, hard move, yell as you move. And there's kind of a rhythm to it when you watch Adam do his hard routes. And so, that's something to think about on the whole subject of, keeping your breathing going. But getting back to the whole core stiffness thing, I guess kind of the take home message is think of your core as being more than just your abs. And so when it comes to, actually, let me make one more comment that's really important. When you are climbing a steep route, very often you are grabbing, less than positive holds. They might be fairly big, but they might be, sloper jugs or, pockets that are rounded. And a big part of being able to grip them is being able to draw your body up against the overhanging wall or up under the overhang. If your hips droop down, then the force vectors become less ideal for both your feet staying on and your hands staying on. So a strong core and excellent core strength endurance, where you can maintain body positions as you're ascending an overhanging route or as you're going out a roof, a strong core that can keep your body uptight under the wall as you're, moving up, and probably doing lots of drop knees and hip turning and things that make it easier to draw your center of gravity upward. By doing that, you can turn, a sloping hold and make it more positive by, you adjust the force vectors. It's kind of hard to explain over the computer, but if this is a sloper hold like this, and I'm just pulling straight down, like if I'm dangling as if I'm campus training, well then, I'm pulling down on the sloper towards the center of the earth. But if I have that same sloper, but it's on an overhanging wall, and I'm able to draw my body into the overhanging wall, while the sloper is still a sloper with regard to the ground, if I can draw my hips up and pull more perpendicular to the sloper hold, it actually becomes more positive. And that's why I like to say a stronger core can mean stronger fingers. It takes less effort to pull on a hold, a positive hold, than it does on a sloper hold. When it comes to strength endurance, you're going to last longer if you're pulling more normal to the hold, more perpendicular to the hold. Making it positive requires less finger force for every single grip, which means you burn through that anaerobic reserve more slowly. It lasts you longer. You pump out not so fast as you would if you are, let's say, climbing up an overhanging wall, neutral, no hip turns, just facing the wall, climbing neutral, with your hips sagging down, which is how a beginner might climb a steep wall, because they don't know all the techniques, how to twist and drop knee and back step and such. So stronger core allows you to use your physical strength, your finger flexor strength, your pulling strength more efficiently, and therefore lends itself to more endurance. And I see this in my own climbing. One of my unfinished projects from last fall season at the Red River Gorge was a long, steep route. And I one-hung the route many times. Felt I was this close to sending it. It's a route called Silky Smooth. It's a 513C. Feeling I was very close to it, but every time on Red Point, I could not connect and endure. And when I watched video of myself on that route, what I'm noticing is I get onto the upper third of the route where I would fatigue and fall off, my hips would start coming out from the wall. I wasn't maintaining stiffness and therefore not climbing most efficiently on that upper section. And so while I could one hang it, if I would hang mid-route and recover, I could climb to the top. But in trying to red point the route, it wasn't my forearms. I mean, my forearms were failing on me. But why were my forearms failing on me? Well, because I believe my core was fatiguing and I was not being able to maintain proper stiffness throughout the route. And therefore, I was becoming more and more inefficient in my movement as I got higher on the route, and therefore pumping my forearms out more quickly. And so there's an important lesson that even though you may fail on a route a boulder, sport route, whatever, with pumped out forearms, or you may fail feeling your fingers weren't strong enough. There can be many underlying causes that precipitated that forearm failure. Not using the best sequence, improper technique, which means you're being more inefficient. Lack of core strength, lack of shoulder strength. I mean, there's a lot of mental issues, fear of falling, fear of failure, things that make you over grip. There's many things that cause energy leaks that lead to your forearms pumping out prematurely. So it would be foolish to assume when you fail on a boulder problem or route that it's as simple as your fingers aren't strong enough, because climbing is so very complex. There are so many puzzle pieces. And so that's where a video analysis or a coach or a partner who really can look for little things can maybe sort out what your limiting constraint is. And it is probably not finger strength. So to kind of wrap up this topic and then move on to some of your questions, what type of exercises should you be doing for your core? Well, again, a novice or a beginner might say, I'm just going to do a few hundred crunches a day. That would be enough to get my abs. And honestly, the crunch, well, I'm not going to say don't do it, isn't the best exercise, because you're not really crunching when you're climbing. It's when we're climbing, our core is being used pretty much isometrically in most situations, and so things that create stiffness. Obviously bouldering, and people that spend a lot of time tension boarding or moon boarding or kilter boarding, doing steep bouldering, obviously, is a core workout in of itself, where you're connecting small hands and small feet. That's a good core workout. But what could you do beyond that? Well, you could also do, if you have, let's say, a woody at home, in addition to bouldering on small hands and small feet, you could put on a weight belt, like a 10-pound weight belt, 5-kilo weight belt, and do some bouldering on larger holds. And that would not only be a pretty good grip strength training exercise and pull muscle training exercise, but it would work your core a lot harder by adding 10 pounds around your waist and still trying to climb with all those hip turns and proper form. You would get an excellent core workout that way. But in terms of actual non-climbing exercises, one that I've been promoting a lot, the past, 10 years or so, is doing a limited amount of deadlifting. Now, deadlifting it's a technical lift. You need to make sure you have proper form. So you want to do some research there, or consult a coach or a climber who knows how to deadlift safely. You don't want to jump in and try to deadlift your body weight from day one. I will tell you, you'll probably get to body weight pretty fast, but you want to start at maybe half of body weight to learn how to do deadlifting. Once you develop the form, then you do want to go to heavier weights, because you don't want to get on a bodybuilder program where you're doing 3 sets of 10 reps, because that's a bodybuilder's type program that will bulk you up. And you don't want to do any lifting that adds mass to your body. That would be counterproductive for climbing steep boulders, steep sport routes. Climbing is a strength to weight ratio sport. So you want to get stronger without putting on weight. And you can do that for the most part with proper, training for climbing. And when it comes to deadlifting, you want to do low rep sets, 3 to 5 rep sets with, a pretty heavy weight, 80% of your one repetition max. So what I do, I weigh 160 pounds. I do a warm-up set of 8 reps, but it's quite light, 135 pounds. I do 8 reps at 135, and then I rest 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. And then my training weight is just above my body weight, around 185 pounds. And I'll do, 3 sets of 3 to 5 reps. That's it. There's no need to build up to, 2 times body weight. I've done that in the past, and it feels like it might become injurious. I think I do start to put on a little bit of muscle mass, which I don't really want. And so you don't need to go there. You're not entering a powerlifting competition, but doing some deadlifts a couple days a week, I would say 2 days a week at most. And during your performance climbing season, just eliminate it. It's not necessary. But during your training season, or maybe during performance season, do it 1 day a week. Doing dabbling with some deadlifting is quite good for your posterior chain. There's various bar exercises you can do, like for hip flexors, you can hang on a pull-up bar and do knee lifts. Of course, if you're a more advanced climber, you can do front levers. First, train them with one bent leg and then work on doing front levers with 2 straight legs. Windshield wipers, where you hang on a bar, you lift your legs up to the bar, and then you go with your torso and your legs from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock back and forth. Those windshield wipers are good for the obliques. Planking is good. Being on your elbows, being on your hands, lift one hand, lift one leg. Just don't plank for a minute and say that's a workout for the core, because it's not enough. You want to do things where you're moving around, do some side planking. And so what we do here at our house, my sons and I, is we do our planks as 5-minute sets. So it does train strength endurance. Deadlifting doesn't train strength endurance because the lift only takes a few seconds to execute. But if you're planking and moving through all these different plank positions, raising one arm and one leg and going on your side and doing a variety of different positions in the plank, for 5 minutes, it's pretty grueling. It's a good strength endurance exercise. And then you can also add a weight belt to that. Add a 5 or 10 pound weight belt and go as you get stronger and go through that same plank routine. And it's going to get you out of breath. It's going to really work you. It's going to simulate and I need to do more of this. It's going to simulate how your core is going to be worked continuously for several minutes as you're ascending up a steep route, or even a steep boulder that takes 30 to 60 seconds to climb. So in summary, think of core training as more than just 1 or 2 exercises. If you're only doing 1 or 2, it's probably not enough for the long game. It may bring you some gains in the short term, but in the long term, you need to do more. So think about doing a family of exercises to train core. When do you work them into your program? Well, I tend to throw them in at the end of my strength and power days, where I'm doing things like limit bouldering and hangboarding and campus training, and kind of do some of the core at the end of those workouts. You could do some on rest days, though. I don't think you want to do a massive core workout on a rest day from climbing, because then when you're back to your next climbing day, you're not probably going to be completely recovered from it. So I think 3 or 4 days a week, if you do a really intensive core workout, or maybe even just twice a week, a really intensive core workout. If you're climbing 4 days a week, maybe on 2 of those days, you do an intensive core workout towards the end of it, just to kind of give you something extra to advance your game. That's how I would go about it. Okay, so there you have it. Let's get to some questions. And I do need to sign off a little earlier today because I've just returned from a short trip and playing catch up on a lot of fronts with business and such. So really pleased to see so many folks tuned in here today. And let's just go to the start here. First question from Matthew. Advice on books or videos that go into depth on climbing technique. My local gyms don't have much in the terms of technique classes. And he says the new collagen flavor is on point. Thank you. Yeah, our supercharged collagen was originally launched more than 2 years ago as just unflavored, but we came out with a vanilla and a chocolate in the past year, and they're really delicious, just mixed in water. Shake it up, drink. You get your collagen dose before you train or climb. And we have another flavor coming out in the spring, something fruity I'll tell you about in the future. But in terms of your question, Climbing technique is something that's really tough to teach through a book or video. It's best done in person with a climbing coach or with a veteran partner who can really help you out with drills and real-time feedback when you're on a boulder or on a climb. My book, Training for Climbing, does have a chapter on technique training. It kind of presents some of the key points, some of the key techniques, some things to think about when you're climbing, like the importance of the left-right rule, connecting an engaged right hand with a left foot or an engaged left hand with a right foot. When you're on routes and getting out of balance and struggling, just knowing that left-right rule and thinking about how can I connect a right hand to a left foot or vice versa is a very helpful rule of thumb. And so the book provides those types of tips and instruction. But again, that doesn't cut it when it comes to really becoming proficient at climbing. And so I would say at some point, hopefully you can visit a gym where there's a good movement coach that you can work with. There's, I'm sure, a slew of videos on YouTube that you could glean some useful information from. So you might go there in the short term and look for some specific videos on things like, say, heel hooking or toe hooking. And I'm sure you'll find some quality instruction that you can then take what you see in the video and then go to your bouldering wall and try to apply it and experiment with it. Trial and error is, the way we learn. Us human beings learn a lot of things when it comes to movement. But when it's a complicated motor skill, whether it's swinging a golf club or climbing a rock, that trial and error is a very slow process, and you're not likely to suss out the best way to do things without some quality instruction. So that's where, I think, again, a coach is a good way to go. Okay, next question here. Yuri, can you please suggest how to reduce unwanted muscle on the legs, shoulders, pecs? Possibly higher repetitions during stabilizer core training, or will the body tune itself out just by doing it right? Yeah, and that's a great question. Climbing is a strength to weight ratio sport, and having big quadriceps and glutes and big pecs and shoulders and biceps, not really what you want. Now, genetics come into play. There are some people that just climb and they're kind of bulky. That's just their genetics. They are very fast twitch. They are more likely maybe better at bouldering than route climbing because of that. Because on routes, that strength to weight ratio is even more important because you need to endure a long time. And so every extra pound you're carrying up a long route adds up. In bouldering, it's more short, powerful routes, and the strength to weight ratio, though important, isn't perhaps as noticeable or impactful. If you're running heavy, let's say. But how to slim down? For many folks, running a few days per week, aerobic training exerts a stress on the body. If you go out and run for 20 or 30 minutes, 3 days a week, that for many folks, not only might you drop a percent or two of body fat by doing regular aerobic activity, just if you eat the same and burn more calories because you're running, you may reduce your body fat slightly, but also you may consume some muscle mass as well. Now, I'm not a big fan of long-term caloric deficits. You can do it at times to really hit a prime weight for performance season. To preserve your climbing muscles, you need to consume a lot of protein, 80 to 100 to 120 grams of protein per day when you're in a calorie deficit. And because you're doing that, you may also preserve that leg muscle you want to atrophy a little bit. And so it's a tough thing for some folks. I would not do any weight training, anything significant, no squatting, no leg extension. I wouldn't be doing heavy bench pressing, nothing that is like a bodybuilder's program with weights if it makes you put on body weight. Again, doing climbing and then some running together, your body will slowly remodel and perhaps you'll lose a few pounds. But there are without a doubt genetic constraints, and each and every one of us has to learn to become the best climber we can within those genetic constraints. So it might be for some people, their height, being really tall or really short, has limitations on certain moves, certain climbs, but you can work around that. That's the beauty of the fact that climbing, there's so many facets to becoming a great climber, to climbing the best that you can climb. It takes many years to refine all of those things. And just because one genetic trait isn't optimal doesn't mean you still can't climb at a really high level. Yes, the very best climbers over many years, over a decade or more, fine-tune everything and probably have a lot of genetic things favorable acting in their behalf. But still, there's a lot of people of all different shapes and sizes that can eventually come to climb at a high level, and so can you. Okay, do you think I can manage to climb 7A, which is a 511D here in the United States, with only one climbing session per week due to a bad work schedule? But I can hangboard and do other conditioning in the evenings, currently climbing 6B. Absolutely. I wrote a book a long time ago called How to Climb 512. And there's many foreign translations out there. One of them is How to Climb the 7th Grade, a Spanish translation. And the concept of the book was that regardless of your genetics and whatever limitations you have in your life, if you love climbing and are committed and training right, you can make it up to the 512 grade or 7A plus grade. And so I think you can absolutely get there, even with your limited schedule of climbing one day a week. I mean, you want to climb as much as you can, not as much as you can. You don't want to climb every single day for the year. That would not be ideal. Most people would be injured from that. But climbing 3 or 4 days per week would be ideal, to accelerate the rate of, developing climbing skill. But if you can only climb one day a week, and hopefully a long one day, doing some other training a few days a week as you are to develop, grip strength and core strength and, all the different aspects physiologically that will arm you with the, physical tools to then, when you're at the gym, work on your technical skills. So when you go to the gym, I would not be doing exercises. I would invest that one gym day a week into climbing a lot of terrain, not just, camping under a system wall for a few hours, but do a lot of different things because you got to get the most learning in that one climbing day per week as you can. And then save your physical training for at home a few days per week. I believe strongly you can get to that 7A grade and probably well beyond. Okay. Is it possible to continue to make strength gains with a combination of hangboarding and outdoor climbing? Currently, I don't have access to a climbing gym, but I do have access to a hangboard and local crag. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are in that situation because, they don't have a gym near them, or maybe they're in COVID lockdown again for a time and the climbing gyms are closed. And yes, doing some climbing, doing some training, you can continue to progress. Now, you always need to be considering, what is your weakest link? And the first conclusion might not be the correct conclusion. Again, you might think it's your grip strength, but it could be your core, as I discussed a little while ago. So you need to dig below the surface and that requires experience and knowledge, which, every year you climb, hopefully you're gaining that climbing experience and wisdom on how to make adjustments to your training. Seeking out good climbing instruction and literature and videos like this, hopefully is continuing your higher education in climbing and arming you with the tools to make those assessments. And I guess as a final thing, and I point this out every January, is to become a better climber this year than you were last year, you can't train like you did last year. You need to mix things up and make your training smarter. And so, and this applies to everybody, whether they're the best climber in the world or just a beginner. It's got to be progressive. You need to be not just doing more of the same thing, but doing some different things and removing some things that are just creating fatigue and taking up time, but not actually making you a stronger, better climber. A lot of people spend their time training, doing things that create fatigue, and they think they're having a great workout because they go home fatigued. But the things that they did aren't actually advancing them. And so don't confuse fatigue from training with a sign of effectiveness. Effective training can make you fatigued, but they're not the same thing. And so, again, you need to be smart about your training and look for ways to train more effectively. What one or two things can you introduce this year that you didn't do last year that could be a bit of a game changer? And maybe it's some of the core stuff I just talked about a little while ago. Maybe you're not doing enough variety in your core training to train all the angles, as I talked about earlier. Maybe that could be something you throw in there. Okay, moving on here. Thanks for the amazing content. Well, thank you for tuning in and for the encouragement. Question: what aspects of training for climbing should a woman climber focus on compared to men? Well, women climbers, they're gifted in their own ways, and I think have the potential to be just as good as men in climbing. There's multiple females that have climbed 515 this past year. And so there's no reason that female climbers can't go out there to the boulders or to the climbing gym or on the roped routes and be trying to do this exact same thing the men are. And of course, they are built differently. They can really utilize their tendency towards being more naturally flexible. And therefore move more efficiently. And actually, by having more hip turnout, for example, do moves requiring less force, less grip strength than men. If you really want to do a fascinating video analysis, to go off on a little tangent here, go to YouTube and look up the YouTube video of Chris Sharma doing the first ascent of biography, the world's first 15A. He did it back, I think, in 2001. At Seus. And then look at the video of Margot Hayes doing the exact same route in 2018. It was the first female 15A. And they're climbing the same route using pretty much the same holds, but they climb it massively differently. Chris, his hips are out from the wall. He's screaming and shouting and really, pulling hard. Margot, her hips are in tight to the wall. She's flowing like water up the wall. And it's really quite remarkably different. And it just goes to show that, men and women are going to climb things a little differently. Men tend to have more brute strength, but less flexibility. And women the other way around tend to be more flexible and aren't naturally as strong, but can become very strong through proper training. So I think female climbers should hangboard train just like men do. But again, everything's got to be appropriate. You can't just start as a beginner and jump into campus training. You need to take it one step at a time and keep the long game in mind, because you can't progress in training for climbing in 1 year from beginner exercises to elite exercises. It doesn't work that way. You're going to get injured if you try to do it. It's going to be a multi-year mission to go from beginner to intermediate to advanced to elite level training. To train like Andra or to train like Brooke Raboutou or name your favorite climber, Janja Gambrit. It's a decade, to travel through that, to progress, develop the connective tissue strength, to develop the nervous system, your mental and technical skills. It's a long-term mission that you need to be on, and take it one step at a time, and that'll keep you in the game versus getting injured by rushing the process. But again, women, perhaps they should put a little more focus on strength training even than men, just because naturally, perhaps they're starting off with a little less strength. And by the way, women tend to have more natural endurance, so they can be a little better at resistance climbing. Steep overhanging routes, women tend to exhibit more aerobic endurance than men, and that's great. But perhaps then, therefore, they need to focus a little more on strength and strength endurance and power endurance type training exercises. I guess that would be kind of the recommendation I would make there. Brandon, can you give us an example of a well-structured core session? Well, I don't walk into the gym and just do a core workout by itself. I'm always doing it as part of a larger workout, a climbing or training for climbing workout. So, a multi-hour, 2 or 3 hour session where I go from warm up into doing some bouldering and hangboard training and maybe weighted pull-up training, kind of a focus on more strength and power. You're going, through all of that over the course of an hour and a half, let's say. And then as the workout is kind of winding down, I shift into doing some core training. And let me tell you what I do, and you should certainly not copy it, but just use it as an example of how I do a variety of things. So as I'm finishing up my hangboarding and my weighted pull-ups and a little bit of campusing, I go to my pull-up bar and do a few sets of front levers. If I'm really feeling strong and not too fatigued, I can do a front lever with pretty perfect form with 2 straight legs. Many days I am not able to do that, and so I do it with a one leg partially bent. And what I like to do is with a partially bent leg, hold a front lever for 5 to 10 seconds. If I can make it to 10 seconds, that's my goal. And so that's pretty hard. That's a tough exercise. You might need to build up to that and again, bend one leg doing a front lever. And so if I can succeed at that 10-second front lever, I rest 3 minutes and I repeat it 3 or 4 or 5 more times. So again, I'm training that isometric, that strong isometric contraction, doing that front lever. Then I will do a couple of sets of windshield wipers using the same pull-up bar. Then I go onto the floor and do a 5-minute plank. Sometimes I add weight for the plank sequence. Again, if I'm really fatigued, then I don't add weight because you want to have good form when you're going through the different plank sequence. And by the way, there's 2 videos on the Training for Climbing YouTube channel that my son Jonathan recorded that are excellent, that take you through. One's a 4-minute plank sequence. I think the other one's a 5-minute plank sequence. So you could, bring them up on your phone and do it as a train along if you wanted to. And then I have an inversion board where I can put my feet at the top and do some decline crunches. I prefer to do decline crunches. It's a very hip flexor oriented exercise, but it's good to do some hip flexor work and your abs, work as well. And I also have a machine that's kind of it's called a ham glute raise machine. A lot of weightlifting gyms have them. Probably not too many climbing gyms have them. It's a device that you face down your body, and it supports you under your hips, and you lock in your feet. And with your hips supported and feet locked in, and your body, my head is here facing down, I can go down and up and work hip extension with that ham glute machine. And that hip extension, it's kind of the similar muscles that you train doing a deadlift. In fact, this type of hip extension would be a good exercise to do first, to develop some of that posterior chain strength before you dabble with deadlifting, or if you don't have access to deadlifting weights. So in any case, everything I just described, the front levers, the windshield wipers, the planking, that is a sequence that works through different positions, and the decline crunches, and then the hip extension on the ham glute machine, doing those 4 or 5 exercises and probably taking 20 or so minutes, maybe a bit more to do it, is a comprehensive core workout. So that gives you an example of the type of thing you could do that would really hit all the different angles, as I said. Okay, moving on here. Michael says, I'm an advanced boulderer, climbing 8 years, but doing my first winter block, looking to make the next step. Currently in lockdown, how should I structure my week? I want to do 9 session. Not sure what that is. But he's an advanced boulder. V9 is pretty darn hard. So you're doing great there, but no doubt you can make it to V10. Why not? And, there is a correlation, without a doubt, between finger force and especially bouldering ability. And so you want to be on a good hangboard program, to take your max strength to the next level. I would look into my 753 repeater protocol that is in my Training for Climbing book, the Training for Climbing YouTube channel, or my trainingforclimbing.com website. If you go there and do a search, you'll find a couple of videos. I think my older son Cameron did one specifically on the 753 protocol and how he used that to take his grip strength up to crazy levels, to climb hard 514. And you can also progress into doing, and you may be strong enough if you're bouldering V9 to do some one-arm hangboard training with just an assister sling, or maybe just one arm by itself if you can hold your body weight on one arm training. So there's a few different hangboard exercises you can use to train maximum finger strength. If you have no injury history, then a campus board would be beneficial to develop rate of force development, which is also important for hard bouldering. And for long-term development, campus boarding is excellent for your connective tissues. Now, you can get injured doing campus training or hangboard training, but long-term, the type of loading and application of force that those training tools give you actually help drive long-term connective tissue adaptations. Now, I believe you mentioned you were a vegan climber, so you're going to want to pay special attention to getting enough protein through plant-based sources, because that is important not only for muscle recovery, but for connective tissue remodeling. And there is no doubt that from a hard climbing workout, your connective tissues break down as much as your muscle, contractile fibers do. We all think about muscle protein, breakdown and the importance of muscle protein synthesis post-workout to rebuild the muscles and make them stronger. But the same thing happens in your connective tissues, albeit more slowly and more subtly. You're not so aware of it until you get injured that you've fallen behind on the process. But protein is extremely important for hard training climbers, getting enough protein every day. not only the branched chain amino acids that help drive muscle protein synthesis, but also the collagen-specific amino acids, which are glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. And they are hard to come by, unfortunately, from vegan sources. So you're going to have to do your research there. PhysiVantage makes a vegan powerplex, which we've amped the amino acid spectrum to help out plant-based athletes, but nothing beats, in terms of those collagen-specific amino acids, hydrolyzed collagen, like PhysiVantage supercharged collagen, is so effective at supporting the remodeling of connective tissues. It's not only been shown in the lab to be effective at supporting collagen synthesis in the human body, but anecdotally, hundreds of climbers and thousands of athletes have felt the difference that it makes. If you're training hard, you need enough protein daily and the right kind of protein consumed daily as well to support your training. And if you do all those things, you can climb V10, and anybody viewing this can probably take their climbing to the next level. But malnutrition isn't going to get you there, and it will get you injured. I'm a big believer that many climbing injuries are not just overtraining, but under eating. And not under eating necessarily calorie-wise, but protein-wise. Okay, I need to wrap things up here in a few minutes, but let's get to a few more questions. Sean says, I struggle with flexibility, especially upper body. Any specific stretches you would recommend, and how often per week? And yeah, flexibility is, there are some genetic constraints there, no doubt, but any climber can improve flexibility somewhat. Hip turnout, hip flexibility, high stepping, stemming, obviously very important for effective movement and to reduce energy leaks while you're climbing. But you mentioned specifically upper body flexibility. And so a few things that I would recommend that maybe the average climber isn't doing is a stretch, and I don't really have a tool here to demonstrate, but you could use a section of rope or even a wood dowel and hold behind your head on one side and then behind your back on the other. So you have your arm internally rotated and your other arm externally rotated. And with that dowel behind your back, you can, pull up and down and hold these stretching positions. And it's good for shoulder mobility. A lot of climbers are very tight through their shoulders, as perhaps you are. As a test, if you just take your hands, can you reach behind your back and touch your fingers? And I can just touch my fingers, which is a sign of fairly good mobility. But a lot of men especially can't do that. They might be many inches apart behind their back. Do the test, have somebody check and measure you and see if you can close that gap over time to the point of you being able to touch your fingers behind your back. So that's a good stretch. You want to do it every single day, not only as part of your warm-up for climbing, but as a rest day thing. If you sit at a computer as I do, you can, even just trying to do that test and touch your fingers gives you a little bit of a test of your shoulder mobility. Another thing common in climbers is tight pec muscles. And so what I do for that is a stretch in a doorway where walk to an open doorway and put your arms and your hands on the side of the doorway and then just gently lean forward to feel that stretch in your pecs. And you can move your hands up a little bit and down a little bit to stretch it in slightly different angles. And that helps open up your chest, which is important for proper arm movement and scapular movement for overhead climbing movements. That collapsed chest, shoulders rounded look that many climbers unfortunately have is something you want to avoid growing into. Or perhaps if you possess that, as I do a little bit, constantly be training, for better posture and better shoulder range of motion and more effective climbing mobility will hopefully be yours in the long term. Alan, okay, he agrees with me. That's good. I appreciate that. I've been doing this stuff a long time, and I pride myself on getting it mostly right, but I'm not infallible, and so don't take everything that I write in my books or website or that I give in these videos, despite my expertise and decades in this business. I get some things wrong, and I'm a lifelong learner, as I hope you will be on this topic. And the climber or coach who thinks they know it all has ceased learning and is not as good as they think they are. So let's move on here. Any chance for future T4C follow-on training videos? Yes, I will put in a request to my sons who are starting to do more training videos. Cameron actually has his own YouTube channel now. If you go to YouTube and search Cameron Hörst, he's starting to, and you'll find a lot of his climbing videos there as well, but he's starting to do training videos there. And my younger son, Jonathan, has done a few training videos for the Training for Climbing YouTube channel. And so as a family, we will continue to share our training passion and knowledge with you through those videos. And it's good to hear that you like those train-alongs. Maybe a train-along hangboard video would be interesting rather than just a actual instructional video. So that's something we'll think about here in the future. What do you think about static holds? Well, what exercise, what static hold? On a climbing wall or with a barbell or in a pull-up or on a hangboard? I'm not sure what you're thinking there, Zach, but just generally, that's called isometric training, where there's no movement going on. And it is a very useful training tool. It can be used in a number of different ways. It can be used in therapy, in recovering from tendinopathy, elbow tendinopathy, for example. You want to do heavy, long duration isometric training. It can be used to train up a weak link in the chain or a sticking point. If you're weak at locking off, well, holding lock-offs for 20 seconds can be a good way to train lock-offs. Or if the toughest part of a pull-up for you is that bottom part, holding yourself just at the starting, that first bit of motion of a pull-up where you're pulling your scapula down and starting to bend your elbows. If you hold there for 30 seconds and do a few sets of that, you will develop strength. You get a very unique stimulus to train that point in the range of motion and get stronger. And so, yeah, there's some significant benefits. I mean, climbing involves a lot of isometric contractions, holding different body positions. And I guess as a final thing, Zach, I would say that, I think climbers should do more isometric training on the climbing wall, on their home wall or their bouldering wall, where you get into a position like a lockdown and a hip turn, and you're reaching up with the next hand. We do that all the time. But what we usually do is we just grab onto the next hold, or we pull hard and, kind of dead point using momentum to grab the next hold. And that's all good. That's good climbing technique. But if you're always using momentum when you're climbing on a bouldering wall, then you don't develop that end range strength. And so that's something that I think is very overlooked and very important. And it's actually something I've had my sons work on the last couple of years because, they're hard climbers. They tend to climb very dynamically, very fast. But that's great for performance, but for developing end range strength, being able to lock off a hold deeply and then be able to press it down, you need to do some things more statically. And so why not get on your bouldering wall and, do that hard move, do the twist, do the reach, but instead of grabbing the next hold, just float over the next hold for maybe 3 to 5 seconds and then grab it. And then do the next move and the next turn, reach, but instead of grabbing the hold right away, let your hand float over it for 3 to 5 seconds. Be creative, do things like that. It's good for your core, it's good for your lock-off muscles, it's good for your grip strength, and that's a way to use some static holds as part of your training. Okay, I see we're up to 1 o'clock. Just let me knock off 1 or 2 more here, and we'll wrap it up for this episode of Training Cafe. And I've been talking so much that my coffee is getting cold. We cannot forget to sip together. You should be reminding me. Okay, how to recover and strengthen your finger after you have had a knuckle injury in one of your fingers, the little one. The pain is the same for over 2 months. Ooh, I don't like hearing that the pain is the same for over 2 months. I mean, if you had a doctor look at it, finger injuries that last for months and that don't get better worry me. And so or any injury for that matter, if it doesn't improve, worries me. You should see a physician to kind of get to the bottom of it. And you mentioned knuckle. Well, what exactly is it? Is it capsulitis, or is it, is there, there of course are several ligaments that serve as pulleys in your fingers. But I'm actually wondering, since it's not improved, could it be a ligament? Is there instability if one of the collateral ligaments, and if you're climbing and pulling down sideways on a finger, like in a pocket, or lifting up, or get your finger stuck in a pocket, you can damage the ligament, and that type of injury, if it's significant, could be something that lasts months. And again, a doctor and doing some imagery and some stability testing would be able to get to the bottom of that quickly. So I can't give specific medical advice to you there, I'm sorry to say. Do you have any training tips or guidelines for climbers over 40 who want to continue to progress? Yeah, well, that's me. I'm over 50 and striving to progress, though it's tough after all these years to do things differently and to be able to, unlock something to get to the next level. But really try to, I think older climbers, we can use our wisdom, we can use our experience, strategy, really learn technique. Younger climbers tend to like to power and muscle through things because they can. Older climbers, we need to use body position and knee bars and heel hooks and all the trickery. That's really helped me as I get older, is having a bigger bag of tricks on a route to leverage. And of course, training, there's no reason you can't still in your 40s get strong and stay strong. Doing appropriate training for your edge, I would guess you can take your finger strength up another notch, and your pulling strength another notch, and your core strength another notch. So there's no reason you can't be doing pretty much everything that a 30-something climber can do, though you need to be careful as you get older. The powerful movements, things like campus training, can be more injurious. You need to spend more time on warming up because older bodies just warm up more slowly. Do some daily flexibility training because that can be something that can help you out to move more efficiently. And I guess kind of all the things I'm mentioning, the goal should be to get more miles per gallon, to have a more efficient climbing machine as you get older. And therefore, even if you are losing strength and power as you get older, and it's going to happen to all of us, no matter how hard we try and train, to still climb hard when you're losing strength and power demands more efficiency. And so I guess think in those terms. Okay. And I think I've gotten about, yeah, I think it's capsulitis. And that could be, it could be capsulitis. This is getting back to the pinky injury question. It could be capsulitis, which a lot of climbers, have swollen PIP knuckles. Mine aren't huge, but they are slightly swollen, and there may be a touch of osteoarthritis in there as well. But more commonly, the capsulitis you would tend to see in the longer fingers than in the shorter fingers. But yeah, I think if you're really concerned about it, and if it's progressive or if it's not getting better, consult a physician, see how they can help you out on that. Okay, well, we covered a lot of territory, many questions, talked about core training, hopefully give you more insight into how to train more effectively and to develop a strong, comprehensive core for better climbing, and gave a bunch of shout outs today to the best climbers of 2020. And we did a couple of times sip some coffee together. So all in all, a pretty good training cafe. I hope you'll join me every other Monday for this episode. Please tell a friend about Training Cafe. Invite them to join us with coffee. And I'll see you next time in about 2 weeks minus 1 hour. Till then, train smart, climb hard, stay safe.